Dean Rusk disagrees with you, and he was the Secretary of State at the time, but that's fine.
The communist nations have exploited the turmoil of a time of transition in an effort to extend communist control into other areas of the world.
Thoughts on Dean Rusk and America's involvement in Vietnam? I know next to nothing about that.
Exactly. For the left, anti-Semitism is little more than a partisan talking point. By David Harsanyi. Quote, Jews are thriving in America, and even with the violent resurgence of anti-Semitism in the Trump era, I've rarely felt personally threatened, perhaps a function of my privilege, end quote, writes New York Times columnist Michelle Goldberg in a piece headlined Anti-Semitism's March into the Mainstream. It must be privilege, then, that explains how a New Yorker could write an entire column in a New York paper about the resurgence of anti-Semitism during the Trump era without once noting what was going on in her hometown. As Armin Rosen detailed only a few months ago, there have been hundreds of violent attacks targeting Jews in New York since 2018, many of them documented on camera, and only a single perpetrator has served even one day in prison. Of course, mentioning that the culprits of anti-Jewish violence are predominantly black or Hispanic and live in one of the nation's most left-wing cities would necessitate acknowledging that anti-Semitism can't be neatly laid at the feet of Republicans. That is inconvenient, no doubt. Quote, for most of my adult life, anti-Semites, with exceptions like Pat Buchanan and Mel Gibson, have lacked status in America, Goldberg writes. Really? Al Sharpton, kingmaker and presidential go-to man, must have slipped Goldberg's mind, even though she is a regular guest on his MSNBC program. Time does not erase the fact that this man spearheaded riots and fueled insidious anti-Semitism and racism that resulted in Jews and others being killed. Has Goldberg ever asked Sharpton to explain his views on what he called diamond merchants of Crown Heights, where, as it happens, a Jewish man was brutally beaten just this summer? Perhaps her privilege has shielded her from that history as well. Now, of course, simply because the liberal establishment embraces Sharpton, or Barack Obama's mentor, who was a notorious Jew-hater, or smiling Nancy Pelosi posed on magazine covers with a woman who says Jews can hypnotize the world for evil, or the Nation of Islam's bigotry is rationalized in the August pages of The Atlantic, or anti-Zionists attack Hillel buildings on college campuses, does not excuse Trump's meeting with Z and Opie Himmler. Either the former president doesn't care who he has dinner with, or he does care, or he doesn't know. None of which are good options. For every Paul Gosar, there is an Ilhan Omar. For every major retailer green, whatever her ills, there is a Rashida Tlaib. And Maxine Waters, who has no problem hanging out with the leader of the Nation of Islam, and Denny Davis, who is a member of the Powerful Ways and Means Committee, and who maintains that the religious leader who called Hitler a very great man and compared Jews to termites was an outstanding human being. It is not happenstance that the leadership of the once celebrated Women's March, organizers of the largest one-day protest in American history, are anti-Jewish conspiracists. For Goldberg, that reality was not a tragic portend of the mainstreaming of hate, but merely heartbreaking. There is plenty of cowardice to go around. I don't believe anti-Semitism is close to being mainstreamed in either party, though with consistent expansion of the squad, that might well change one day. Yet in trying to make the case that bigotry is unilaterally being mainstreamed, Goldberg is compelled to stretch her arguments in risible ways. First, she smears the villain du jour, Elon Musk, writes Goldberg, quote, enthusiastically welcomed both Trump and Yi back to the platform, and has been tiptoeing up to the edge of anti-Semitism himself, end quote. A platform that hosts theocratic fascists of Iran and Chaicom tyrants who manage concentration camps can handle the ugly ideas of a rapper. Allowing open political discourse, even from the odious ones, is a liberal notion, not an anti-Semitic one. It's the same basic value that no doubt is used as a justification of the New York Times editor to give tyrants like Vladimir Putin, though not Tom Cotton, space to speak on the pages as Michelle Goldberg. The columnist then turns to the most cynical claim of anti-Semitism going around, the preposterous notion that any criticism of George Soros, the most generous benefactor of hard-left causes in the world, and a man who, by his own admission, feels little connection to Judaism and generously funds anti-Semitic BDS movement, constitutes the spreading of anti-Jewish tropes. But Goldberg adds a new member to this specially protected group, Jewish retired Army officer Alexander Vindman. Vindman, whose entire media career is centered on the self-aggrandizing notion that he is a hero of democracy. Musk's sin is calling Vindman a puppet and a puppeteer, which Goldberg says echoes an old anti-Semitic trope about Jews pulling the strings behind world events. This, too, is a smear, since Musk is referring to Vindman's alleged spamming and bot campaign on Twitter, not any serious political issue. The notion that Musk knew, much less targeted Vindman because of his faith, is outlandish. Perhaps Goldberg would correct the record next time she's speaking to Mehdi Hassan, when the host isn't spreading blood libels.